every executive we work with, no matter where they're on their walk, the right thing to say is, yeah, I'm ready to develop as a leader. I want to help my people. If you don't say that, you're basically walking yourself out the door.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is they have to be in so much pain that they decide it sucks more to sit in this pain than it does to change my behavior.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, the pain has to be greater than the complacency. So it's got to be more painful to sit in your seat than it is to get up and start walking in a different direction you haven't walked in before. And that goes down to human nature, right?
Yeah.
We like comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the people that we seek, are the people that are truly exhausted and have recognized this isn't working. This is not working. There's got to be a better way.
You're listening to The Pivotal Leader, where modern leaders talk about the moments that shifted their organizational cultures and pivoted their teams to success. Hey, everybody. This is Gina Tremarco, Chief Results Officer of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. Each week on The Pivotal Leader, I feature inspirational leaders who know how to positively impact their cultures, employees, and brand through culture building. On this episode of The Pivotal Leader, I interviewed Jason Williford, a professional business speaker and executive consultant focused on all human decisions, where he works with domestic and international organizations of all shapes and sizes. And he's also a licensing consultant for Culture Index, which has really got me excited about having him on this podcast. I spoke to him weeks prior to this recording and got really fascinated by what he does. So we'll dive into that during this episode. A little bit about the Culture Index. It's a strategic advisory firm that works exclusively with visionary entrepreneurs, CEOs, business leaders, and management to scale and transform organizations using applied analytical traits. And if you've never taken the Culture Index profile assessment, it is like no other personality assessment I've taken. I've done it all. I've done the DISC. I've done the Myers-Briggs. I've done it all. There's nothing like this. That's what really got me motivated for this podcast. I felt like I was seeing a therapist when Jason reviewed my results with me, and you're probably going to go through that again with me on this podcast. A little bit more about Jason before we start the interview. He started his career as an entrepreneur in the first grade and has not slowed down since, with experience in startups, including several of his own, to Fortune 500 companies. The application of the who and how to hire while building an efficient and effective team has proven paramount throughout his career. After selling a construction company that he started during college, he went on to become a division leader for a profitable, privately held Midwest-based construction firm. He was charged with running a division in startup mode while driving growth through economically difficult times and preparing for the profitable sale of the organization. Once this was accomplished, Jason went on to start his speaking and consulting career, which hosts numerous leadership, developmental workshops, and presentations a year for CEOs and senior business leaders from coast to coast. Since that time, he has been working with many organizations that are driving for profitable growth while maintaining subjectivity with the human capital side of the business. And boy, this is so important today. I hear so much about this. I get so many questions about this. How do we not just recruit our employees, but how do we engage them and retain them? Pivot 10 Results has been doing a lot of training around that. So I'm really fascinated by the work that Jason does with the Culture Index. So let's dive into this episode and learn more from Jason. Hey, Jason, thank you for joining me on the Pivotal Leader podcast.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
I've already done your intro and I talked you up a whole bit. And really what I was really pushing on was how impactful our last conversation was around the Culture Index. And that's really been transformative for me, like in that one conversation we had. So that's what got me really interested in having you on this, because this show focuses on culture and how do we shift cultures and the impact of culture. And there's so much to that. There's so many different things that affect it, from sales to operations and really the human capital piece of it. So we'll dive into that today. What I always like to do is start with, let's talk about you. Let's find out more about you. And the other thing that grabbed me was that you started as an entrepreneur in first grade. And I love that because I was a pretty young entrepreneur because my dad forced my brother and I to work in flea markets when we were like 10 years old. So I want to hear about your entrepreneurial story in first grade.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the flea market statement. Just random flashback. My first pair of Nikes came from the flea market, and I actually don't think they were Nikes. I think they were Mikeys. I'm pretty sure they were hot because they were taped up. Yes. But anyway, so I was on to like my fourth business venture by then. Yeah, so I really wanted a football. My parents worked really, really hard to keep a table and food on the table and clothes over us as kids. And so I wanted a football, and we didn't have the money for a football. And I realized I only had 50 cents to my name, and I needed $5 to get the football that I wanted. And so my mother was an artist, one of the many things that she's done, and she painted landscapes with knives. And I realized, buddy, I was drawing, not paying attention to the teacher in kindergarten, which went all the way through college, by the way. Horrible student, although I somehow got through. I was drawing, and the little boy next to me said, hey, can you teach me to do that? So the light bulb immediately went off, and I said, sure, it'll cost you 50 cents at recess, and we'll stay in here. So he paid 50 cents. I helped him learn how to draw a mountain with a little tree line and a little lake at the bottom. And then the next day, business tripled. So I was on a good growth curve. And then evidently, that was my first little girl. It was 2 boys and a girl. Evidently, she gave me her lunch money and went home hungry. And so the next morning, an angry mom went into the office. Some little boy had stolen or had taken her daughter's lunch money. When I'm thinking, this is going to be a $3 day, 50 cents, $1.50. I'm thinking I'll at least double. I was counting on $3 to $4.50, and bam, football done. Sell the business, whatever's next. And I got shut down by the administration. So anyway, so I figured out at an early age that I made a much better employer than I did employee. Yeah, serial entrepreneur. I've worked in very large Fortune 100 companies all the way down to startups. And kind of my passion is the mid-market, which is where most of the activity happens. Some of those are small publicly traded companies. But for the most part, they're privately held organizations that are all about scale. And that's where I like to spend my time.
Interesting. I had such a flashback as you were telling me that story about being an artist, because I'm like, did I hear this story before? Why does it sound familiar? And there's a similar story from another podcast guest, and you might want to listen to it. His name is Paul Emilio, and he's in the tech space. And he had a kind of a similar story. They came over from Italy, and he was very young when they came over and trying to make some money. And the kids would pick on him. He's the new kid from another country. And he started drawing pictures of the kids, drawing their portraits. And so that's how he was able to endear himself to them. And same thing, he started selling the portraits and taking kids' lunch money, which became an issue. And he went on to be this amazing inventor and CEO. So nice. I'm going to have to connect the two of you, because it's I was like, boy, this story is so deja vu. So the moral of the story is I see a pattern of behavior where children are so amazing at being able to identify opportunities and just run with it and not think twice about it. Would you agree that they've got a really good way of selling?
Yeah. What's interesting is when you get into the nature versus nurture, and there's many different types of entrepreneurs, but those that are most natural, it just happens. I didn't go to school that day saying, oh, I'm going to start a business. After that, I was too young to get in the flag football league. So I started my own flag football league and convinced everybody to buy uniforms, which covered my cost and the football. So, awesome. You don't plan that. You just do it. Just the thought, and so there's different levels, like I said, of entrepreneurs. But for those of us that have the gift of ADD or ADHD with an entrepreneurial gene, it just kind of happens. Yeah.
A quick story, back to the flea market. So my dad made us work in the flea market, and I hated it. And I can still I remember that smell so distinctly of the flea market. And you talk about hot items. It just had this weird stink. I could actually smell it right now. That's how much I remember it. And my dad being Italian, and he grew up during the Depression, which does not make me old. It just made my father like 50 when I was born, and my mother was 25 years younger than him. But he maybe had some affiliation with some mob activity, possibly, because that's how a lot of Italians worked when they came over. And so rumor has it that a lot of the merchandise my dad had us selling was hot, which is funny in itself. He would make us go every weekend, and there was a furniture vendor across from us selling couches. They offered me a job and said, do you want to come here and sell couches? And I'm like, yeah. They were paying me $50 a day at age 10, and I could sit on a couch all day. I literally sat on a couch. I didn't have to do the work my dad had me doing. And I was making 4 times the amount of money. So I went to my dad and said, hey, I got to quit. I got a better offer across the way. And he's like, oh, do what you got to do. And I'm like, and I need a ride still. So I managed to still
love it,
get in his car and keep my job selling furniture. Anyway, you conjured up all these childhood memories. So I know you then went into a construction firm. You want to talk a little bit about that and then how you transitioned into what you're doing today?
Yeah, so we actually did a construction project for the founders, the co-founders of Culture Index. And I'm going to say that was 2007-ish, somewhere right in there. And immediately, Cecilia Bruning and Gary Wallstrom, they're the co-founders of Culture Index. We were designing and building an outdoor living area at their house. And so immediately she started profiling me. I thought she was being nice, like asking me these questions. No, not at all. Definitely a capitalist, and she saw opportunity. And she sent me the Culture Index survey over the next 2.5 years. I did several projects for them 4 times, and I deleted it. I opened it up and was like, I don't have time for this, delete. And then opened it up at one point and said to my wife, Betsy and I have worked together, and said, are you sending me some girly magazine personality, delete, and I was like, what? Literally, I said that to her sitting in the office. It's like yesterday, right? And then finally, my majority partner, the guy who really ran it, and I was kind of along for the ride, decided to sell the organization. He had a bad feeling about the future, and I ended up selling it 6 months before the recession hit. And clearly a very, very intelligent guy and listened to his gut, real smart business guy. Ron Reichman. So he sold the business, and then we had to stay on for a year, and he took care of Betsy and I. It was a very good deal for us to stay on for a year. And then we were looking for something new to do. Had no idea what Culture Index was. We just knew they saw a lot of deal flow and didn't understand it, was just kind of looking around, and then reached out to Cecilia, and she said, yeah, but this time you have to fill out that survey. And so I jokingly said back, what survey is that? And she said, you know damn well what survey that is. So I filled it out and literally laughed out loud when she said, you should think about coming in the business, because all I remember is Pavlov's dog from psychology. And she said, that's our model. We take entrepreneurs and then we'll teach you the psychology. It's about a 2-year learning process. It's hard. It's difficult. But if, you have the entrepreneurial experience we need, and that's how we go to market. And so I went through that process, then moved down to Texas towards the end of that 2 years, I guess about 18 months in, and where I'm from, and then opened up Culture Index Dallas Fort Worth, and here we are.
Can you talk a little bit about Culture Index and what it does? Up in the intro, I had said, it's like nothing I've ever taken, and there's a lot of assessments out there, but this is no DISC, this is no Myers-Briggs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So we look at we go to market a little bit differently. So if you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, less clients and deeper relationships, that's really kind of what this organization is about. So people, although it's the tip of the spear, there's 3 things that the personality survey you took. There's really 3 things that we attack: more revenue, more EBITDA or profit, or scalability, which is a little bit more open for interpretation, meaning scalability. But that could be, a lot of the time our conversations are now, hey, we need to get to a certain number in order to sell for this multiple, or we're looking at doing acquisitions, or we're looking to get bought out by private equity in 3 years, or we're looking to IPO, or I'm looking to take the company from $1 million in revenue to 10 million, whatever the goal is. So what we do is we spend all of our time studying these 7 work-related traits in order to drive top line, bottom line, and scale. Okay, so we go to market a lot different than my mentor, again, Gary Wallstrom and Cecilia Bruning, decided to take the model and turn it upside down and work with fewer clients and have deeper relationships, where we're using it really to grow companies. So really we're a growth organization, but we're extremely niched on just getting the right people on the bus and in the right seat mathematically. So as we do that, it's all about, how do I find A players? And that's about 10% of what we do is finding and keeping talent, teaching our clients how to do that, or finding talent. 90% of what we do is keeping it, which is the hard part.
Yeah.
Finding it is not hard today. Keeping it, getting it to actually get on your bus, A players, that's the difficult part. And so that's where we spend most of our time, is really studying, interpreting, and mobilizing inside of our client companies these 7 work-related traits, because we believe the biggest leading indicator to any success are the people. Also, Gary defines culture, and that's as we talk about Culture Index, we believe culture is defined as the sum total of the people in it. And as the leader goes, so does the rest of the company.
So what are those 7 traits?
Yeah, so we look at 4 traits compared to each other and the other 3 on specific placement. And we measure traits versus behaviors versus needed outcomes in the role. Okay, so kind of 3 different graphs we spend our time on. The traits themselves are autonomy, social ability, pace or patience, conformity, energy units or mental stamina, and logic and ingenuity.
Can you touch on each one of those a little bit? Is there some specifics that are important, any of those or all of those?
Yeah, so really what's more important than the traits individually is how the concert sounds with all the instruments playing. right? Because we look at the combination. What's more important is not the individual traits in isolation. We do break those down in the beginning just to have context. But really what we're concerned about is what's it look like in sum total in motion for the goals of the company. So it's not so much about the individual characteristics as it is how they fly together. But to oversimplify, it's kind of a chess match of what we do of taking who we're dealing with, right? Who are the owner operators or who's in control? Right. Who's our primary person? What kind of business are they in? Are they intangible or intangible? Are they in solutions or are they in commodity? Are they finance or are they selling vehicles? Are they in insurance? It doesn't matter what industry they're in, but it does matter what type of business it is. So we take that information and help them understand, really, this is what you're great at. This is what you suck at. Stop it. And know your audience.
And you're saying that to those who are in charge, or you would be having that conversation with anybody who's taken the assessment?
CEO or president down only. That's the only way that we do business, because it's all about the starting with what's the end goal. But yeah, ultimately it trickles down into the organization. It is a knowledge transfer process where we're teaching people how to use it in-house, where they become somewhat self-sufficient after 5 or 6 years. So it's not quickly. But yeah, we start owner operating, and it definitely trickles down to the employees for sure. We do what we call rollouts, where we meet with the organization and go over the data and transfer basic information to the employees. But this is definitely geared toward scalability of the organization. So we're spending our time on anyone leading, directing, hiring, or managing. That's where we spend almost all of our time.
Is the culture index used on, because you're talking about recruiting and retention, would this be used on employees coming into an organization?
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of the tip of the spear once people get going. And, how do we raise the bar on how do we find A players? So yes, our client companies do use it as a part of the interview process, as part of the screening process on how to find talent.
And that is such a big issue right now. Like you were saying, it's easy to find them. It's harder to keep them. I actually been giving a talk called Catch and Keep Them. I spend more time talking about how do we keep them, the engagement piece of it, and how do we keep them engaged. I look at it like my analogy is dating. It's real easy to say, hey, let's go out. We're totally interested in each other. And then it's far harder for us to keep it going because now we have to work at it. It was easy in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it's easy because statistically in the United States, according to the State of the American Workforce, Gallup's poll, which I think is an awesome poll they do every year, and I'm rounding, but about 30% of the workforce is engaged.
Yeah.
And it hovers right around there, plus or minus. And think about it. Okay, so we have 150 million Americans in the workforce and 70% aren't. That's 105 million Americans that are not happy with his or her. That's 105 million people that are looking for a professional date. It's not hard unless you're, a creeper or stranger danger or smell like, cabbage or something. You're going to get a date. I mean, it's not hard. Keep them, on the other hand, is by far. So a lot of the time we teach people, again, know yourself, know your audience, So it's an act of this self-discovery and then self-discipline to speak to your audience where they are, not where you are. And see that where the transformation happens. And it's not immediate. It takes time. It takes discipline. It's hard and it sucks. It's just, there's nothing easy about it.
No.
And so people have to be committed to changing their behavior depending on their direct report, or getting a person that understands. It's kind of meeting in the middle, but you have, both of them have to understand. And I'm talking about the executive level right now. It's not easy. Have we made it where it's simple to understand per your intro? Yes, absolutely. It's kind of like, I would use the analogy of, let's go online and look for a marathon plan. If you haven't run before, let's just do a half marathon plan. Okay, we'll just go there. It's pretty easy to find it.
Yeah.
Right? There's a ton of them, a ton of that. A bunch of people that are addicted to running, right? So we get on there, we download it. Okay, I hired them. Your body, if you have not run more than 10 miles, or if you're ramping up beyond that to 15 miles, I don't care how good a shape you're in, your body is going to scream at you. It hurts loud. Yeah. And that's the part where you've got to, as the SEALs say, embrace the suck. And so it's got to be a cognitive effort to understand. You've got to get out of your own way. You have to understand what your audience needs.
A tangent. You know me, you've already done my assessment. I'm like a squirrel seeing shiny things. My company, Carolina Improv, which is the improv comedy theater and school that I also own, one of our core values is embrace the suck, because you're going to make mistakes and we teach people how to fail.
Love it. Fail fast, fail often, move on.
Yeah, exactly. We find so much creation in that failure. So embracing the suck. And to kind of continue on this a little bit more, that piece I see, and I'm sure you see, that again, it's so easy to bring those employees in and then nobody wants to do the hard work. It's like, okay, we got them hired. Okay, great. Here's your desk. Go. What do you see? Because you're working with a lot of companies. What are some of the top challenges that you're seeing in these areas?
Well, it all comes down to pain. The people that are ready, really ready, every CEO, every president, every VP of sales, every COO, every executive we work with, no matter where they are on their walk, the right thing to say is, yeah, I'm ready to, develop as a leader. I want to help my people. If you don't say that, you're basically walking yourself out the door.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is they have to be in so much pain that they decide it sucks more to sit in this pain than it does to change my behavior.
Yeah.
So that pain could be an exit. It could be not growing. It could be scaling up for whatever reason. Could be keeping my job. Whatever it is, the pain has to be greater than the complacency. So it's got to be more painful to sit in your seat than it is to get up and start walking in a different direction you haven't walked in before. And that goes down to human nature, right?
Yeah.
We like comfort. Mm-hmm. But those are the people that we seek, are the people that are truly exhausted and have recognized this isn't working. This is not working. There's got to be a better way to find and keep talent. And when they actually get to that point, that's where we engage. So when we educate people on our process, we try to push them away because we don't want to waste time. Everybody loves when they see their culture index and they understand what Dr. Louis Janda, under the employment of Gary and Cecilia, built for us. It's scary accurate. The true technical term, if you're talking to the psychometricians, which if you're from Gainesville, Texas, like I am, and you didn't know what a psychometrician was, that means a psychologist and a mathematician met, they had a baby. It's called psychometrics, right? And so this was years ago. And so when you talk to them, it's called validity. All it really means in layman's terms is the data correct or is it not? It's scary accurate. And everybody's fascinated by the level of accuracy, validity, in the information that we give, like you experienced yourself.
Yeah.
But now, acting upon that. So that's where you draw the line in the sand. Are you going to do something about it? So we educate people to the best of our ability, and then the right people come in. And if people aren't ready yet, that's fine. There's plenty of great testing companies. That's not our model.
Yeah.
We're going to change organizations, and we're not going to waste our time on people that don't want that. We have a high client retention rate. About 90% of our clients every year renew for another year. And they will tell you, yes, it's the data, but also it's the person on the other end of the phone that's mobilizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's intangible, right? It's hard to describe that. The data is tangible. It's 0.91 in average in validity, which in less than 10 minutes, which is incredibly valid. And so that's tangible. What's intangible is how we mobilize it for those three things.
The validity of it was really fascinating for me. And I've mentioned that a couple times now. And I mentioned it in the intro that I pre-recorded before this. It was scary accurate. It was like you got into my head and you knew me better than anybody. And it was a game changer. It was an eye opener. There's some things that I'm transitioning to in my business. And it was kind of a game changer for me to get me to the next level. In that short amount of time we talked and reviewed my results. Why don't we do that?
Excellent.
Can we look at my results? Because I'm a pretty transparent person. I put myself out there. And I think most people who know me would probably agree with everything in there. So let's...
So you want to go through your... okay, let me pull those up. We'll run through the survey. I'll just run through it really high level.
Yeah.
So, and let me give some context also so you can kind of see it from a person that's scaling her business. The chess match we play, if objectively, let's say, Gina, you and I sat down with our good friend Keith and said, okay, let's start a company. None of us are going to work there, but let's start a company. Whatever the company is, we're going to sell widgets.
Yeah.
Okay. Really, the game psychologically that we're playing is how much gas pedal do we need? Okay. So gas pedal is just going to mean offense. So if you're an athletic or war analogy, how much more new ground are we going to get? How much brake pedal do we need, which is securing the supply chain? So, right, any war book or any warrior you speak to, anybody coming from our armed forces and so forth, they're going to tell you, look, without securing the supply chain, you're toast, right? And so the D trait is basically securing, the A trait is growing, and then you have, then I'm oversimplifying this, but then you have the B trait, which is the social ability, which is kind of the glue, or I call it the weld, because it's an intangible process. It's the people portion, right? So it holds us together. It's the glue. It's the weld that holds the machine together. And then the blue dot, the C trait is a matter of, do you need patient people or people like Gina that have the attention span of a mosquito chugging Red Bull, or lack thereof, lack of patience, right? For example. So really that's the game. So in context, in every organization, whether they have 10,000, 50,000 employees, or whether it's 4, It's the same combination. We just overcomplicate it, right? And complexity is the master manipulator to ruin productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So the removal of complexity is extremely important in this process. You've got to eradicate and kill complexity. If you've read Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, that just came out a few years ago, I mean, that's the rhythmic trance that we all get into. Okay, it's too complex. Well, first of all, it's an excuse for I'm ignorant and I can't figure this out. So we work really hard to make it simple, therefore actionable. So when I look at your pattern, if I'm running through it and summing it up very quickly, Gina is very assertive, aggressive, independent, hard-headed, thick-headed, determined, hard-headed, thick-headed, proactive. This is a young woman that wakes up every day that needs to be in control of her own destiny as opposed to anyone else being in control of it for her. She's very outgoing, persuasive, chit-chatty, intuitive, empathetic. So just tying those two things together right off the bat, hide your checkbook because this woman can work a room anytime she sees fit. I touched on her attention span, which literally none. 98% of all people on the entire planet have a longer attention span than this woman, which means she's in the highest 98th percentile for the big Harvard term would be multitasking, variety, change, speed, sense of urgency. And she's a nonconformist. So she's out of the box, unrestricted, big picture, does not need any historical information in order to make a new move, and prefers to really kind of break the rules as opposed to follow them. Now, there are certain things that she would be conforming about or selectively conforming about. So there'll be parts of her business or parts of her closet at the house that'll look like a photo shoot, and then she'll have like 6 rotating sock drawers and shelves. So it'll be this weird combination, right? She has a big mental stamina or energy pack, so she can go longer than the average person. If she gets more than, I would say 6.5 hours of sleep without an alarm, I'd be surprised. Her heart's on her sleeve. You never have to guess where you stand. If it's a good day, you're going to know. If it's a bad day, you're going to know. There's no guesswork, open book. And she has an extra level of ingenuity. So this is interesting because this is the only trait we measure that has a norm range and then a not norm range or a high range. So she has this unique ability to think up new things that are uninvited. The problem is 7 out of the 10 ideas that come from that trait are plumb nuts. There's no applicability. Like she'll be thinking about like, Jay, I really like your training facility. Did you notice how that air duct back there? It really catches dust bunnies. And if you, hey, Gina, that's a great point. But we've been talking about personality now. So that's what her mind does all day long.
It's exhausting.
Just gets up and leaves the building. Yeah. But here's the deal. Every once in a while, you'll have an idea, a head turner. Hey, why didn't I think of that? Man, that's a good idea. The bad part is you got to weed through the dust bunny covers on the air duct, whatever's going on. So bigger, faster, stronger will never be Gina's challenge. Finding a COO and a CFO that can keep up with Gina will be the problem until she's 6 feet under.
Wow.
So for someone like you, you're a gas pedal. You're an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. I mean, at 10 years old, they saw more than just a cute little 10-year-old girl to sit on a couch. They could smell the talent because you're not normal, right? So there's a gift with that of moving things. Now, you've got to find people as radical enough, and most importantly, Gina, people that you don't run off. So you've got to know your audience, finding the person that can execute upon the back end, and then it's game on.
Wow. Scary. And during that whole time you were talking, I did a load of laundry.
There it is. If anybody wondered if she's sitting actively taking notes, the answer is squirrel on a high wire in an ice storm. There it is, scurrying about with the last con from the tree in the middle of winter, going, "Oh yeah, I'm with you, Jason.
It's
A trait, right?"
I think you'll probably agree with this. I think you have to know who you are and you have to know what those weaknesses are. And I know most of this about me. You really drill it into more details. Even doing these podcasts, the only way I can truly stay focused is to take notes during the entire podcast. Mm-hmm. That's how I stay on track so that I make sure I'm listening, so that I'm ready to ask the next question. Otherwise, I wander all over the place. And so that's really accurate. Now, you take that you do this with me, and you do this with other CEOs. They get this information about themselves. And I'm guessing that they either go, wow, that's really accurate. Or do you get any resistance back on that? And then what's the next step once you've revealed this information to them?
Yeah, excellent question. So where we get resistance is not on the data that I went through with you. It's who doesn't that's running a company, or what person doesn't want to know more about themselves, right? I mean, you want to get to know somebody, how many authors have written this? Just start asking them about themselves. Mm-hmm. They're going to open up if you're really actively listening. So what we do is, the part that I just did was kind of a cool, almost parlor trick, right? Yeah. The next step where people, everybody likes that. The next step is mobilizing it. That's where it gets pretty sticky. Mm-hmm. So the next step would be when we move into how a person is behaving at work, as opposed to who they are, there's two roads that we go down, and we're very distinct in these roads. And we always ask permission. Number one, like what I just went through with you, is very academic, although it's got a little North Texas Gainesville thrown into it, a little bit of my language and little quip remarks. There's a core language that I was very, very distinct on using that Gary and Cease taught me when I started. All right. And then I just kind of have fun with it on the edges out around the core language. That's really an academic approach. The other leg that really people engage us for is to speak with radical candor. Or another way to say it would be, we work really hard at eradicating bedside manner. Mm. We're going to tell you what you need to hear, even if you don't like me for it. And I've lost business many times, walked away from one dream client, to be honest, and it still is unsettling a little bit. But I spoke the truth, and the truth wasn't welcome there. So like, we don't do sacred cows. No offense to anybody from India, right, or Hindu, but the reality is sacred cows make really good Wagyu in Texas. That's really good steak, right? And so that's the area where we get pushback, is when people say they're for profit, but their behavior is in conflict with this. Say they want to grow, but they're not willing. And we get into some real tough conversations. So where we get pushback is when people have something set in their mind and they're emotionally or illogically attached to it. And again, the medium's not ready for paint. So if people say, hey, yeah, you don't need to be completely candid. You can, kind of just tell me what it says. Then that's a tell that, yes, I'm going to spend the next few minutes with them going over the data, but we're not a good match for each other. That's where the resistance comes. But you can't deny the truth. It's math. Yeah, I'll give you an extreme example. I'm sitting with a group of CEOs in Dallas-Fort Worth in a CEO executive format, and I'm sitting with a woman that's similar to you, doesn't like humans quite as much, but besides that, very, very similar, if you can picture that, a little bit more introspective. Besides that, you guys are pretty similar. And she pulls up this graph and says, well, what do I do with this? Mind you, I had a lot of context. I knew what kind of market she was in. I knew what struggles she already had. We'd had a good 10 minutes, 15 minutes of conversation around the context of her company, around her pain. So you can't just say this stuff flippantly. We take bold statements extremely serious. And the only time we make extremely bold statements is when we know mathematically it's just math. 1 + 1 is 2. So I went through the data of this person, and I went through the bottom graph, and I said, okay, what are you trying to do with this person? Do you see the incongruency? It was very, very clear. Square peg in a round hole. Like who the person is naturally and who the person needed to be at work were completely out of whack. And she said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, you have to remove him from his role, because your expectations, you're wanting someone that is going to be boom, 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 right? She goes, yes. That's exactly what I want. I said, Bernie Sanders is not going to run the Capitol campaign for Donald Trump. This is not going to work, and I walked her through the math again. She said, what do I do? I don't have another role for him. I said, well, then you need to cut him loose so he can find a job he'll like. And she started, and this is a very strong woman. She got a little glassy eyed and said, Jason, this is my husband. I said, okay, great. I said, okay, great. I said, here's the deal. Don't ruin your marriage and your company and your finances at the same time. You need to fire him. She's still a good client today. And that was 3 years ago.
Did she fire him?
Because let's just say he found gainful employment in a different area. But I mean, that's the reality. Now, we're not cavalier. We're not cowboy about this or cowgirl about this stuff. But we see stuff, and we're speaking with that much candor. I've sat with two guys in my conference room with a father and son. I built this company for my son and had the same conversation with the guy in the room and said, look, when your body is dead and cold in the ground, do you want to drive your son crazy and your business legacy into nothing? And it was extremely awkward. The guy's sitting there, and he called. The first time he gets away from his dad, 20 minutes later, he calls me, Jason, thank you so much. I've been trying to tell him this for 30 years. That wasn't my goal, but I was speaking the truth, right? And then they immediately became a client after that to help them fix that. So it's really where the resistance comes is some people, they don't want to hear the truth. And that means the pain of where they are really isn't at a place where they want to change. Does that make sense, Gina?
Yeah. And that's a whole nother topic for, I think, for another podcast of why don't people want to face that and hear that? And I think that's what holds people back. We had been talking about other entrepreneurs, and is it their ego that stops them from scaling? Is it their resources and infrastructure? But that's a whole nother, maybe we'll come back and have another podcast around that. So
the level of ignorance, but people quit people.
Yeah, all day long. And then you talk about the complacency piece of it. I've seen so many businesses really hurt because they have sunk into a culture of complacency, and the leader at the top is so oblivious to what's happening below. And I think complacency is a killer.
No doubt.
One last tangent question, and then we'll get ready to wrap it up. You talked about people like they're in so much pain, and that's when they're ready to make a move. How do you find those people in your business that are in that pain? When do they finally raise their hand and say, help me?
Well, inevitably, our word is spread two ways. The most prevalent way by far is referrals. So there'll be a VP of sales or a CEO having dinner with a friend that owns another company in a like role, and someone's complaining about their whatever it is. They're not hitting their top line, or salespeople or whatever. And so that's definitely where most of our work comes from, is word of mouth. Secondarily, we educate people. We take people through a demonstration process and educate them and show them how the program works and what it does. So every time I go into what I call a demonstration call, it's just, I pretend like they're a paying client, right? So, and all of us strive to do that, where we go in and just, hey, they're paying me to do this. They happen to be paying me with their time today. So here we go. And we just start teaching them immediately. At the end of the call, the right people are going, hey, what's next? And the people that aren't quite ready for that journey, we go our separate ways, and that's okay. So that's really how people find us. Is we do a lot of workshops and speaking engagement, and then people run to us, or more often than not run away and make really nice, colorful blogs about us and so forth.
Well, speaking of doing workshops and speaking and getting out there and educating people, if people listening to this podcast want to learn more about you or what you're doing or Culture Index, or find out where you're speaking next, what would be the best ways for people to get a hold of you?
Definitely reach out to our Dallas-Fort Worth office, Culture Index Dallas-Fort Worth. My email is jwilliford, WILLIFORD, at cindexinc.com. C for culture, indexinc.com. If you go to cindexinc.com, then you might get thrown, we're all licensees around the country. Mm-hmm. So you might get thrown to another market, but if you want to reach out to us specifically, that's my email, and myself or Izzy will pick up the email and get back to you promptly.
That's great. So we'll include that information on how to reach out to you. Are you on the interwebs? Are you on social media? I know you're on LinkedIn. I have your LinkedIn profile.
Yes, I am on LinkedIn. The World Wide Web is a place I don't spend much time. so yeah, LinkedIn is, you can go there. That's just fine, or email.
Okay, great. So we'll include your contact information in the show notes, so if anybody wants to reach out to you. I'm also going to, for everybody, Jason did that, a kind of review of who I am. I'm going to put a link to that document as well. So if you didn't see that in the show notes, you can go back to it, look at it. It's just pretty color dots, but you can kind of go along with Jason's report of me. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was really awesome information for our listeners, Jason.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
We're going to wrap it up, so hold on a second, Jason. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for listening today to The Pivotal Leader. You can find show notes, like I said, for this episode, including contact information for Jason on our website at thepivotalleader.com. The Pivotal Leader is a production of Pivot 10 Results, a strategy and training company that helps businesses shift from people problems to performance results. You can find this podcast on iTunes, and if you're an iTunes subscriber, please leave a rating and a review. That really helps us. And feel free to email me any questions you might have about employee engagement and customer acquisition at gina@pivot10.com. And I'll email you back. And hey, if you know a pivotal leader who should be on this podcast, maybe that someone is you, drop me a line and let me know. And until next time, if you're feeling stuck in your business, it's probably time to pivot. You've been listening to The Pivotal Leader. To learn more about how to shift your culture and pivot to success, visit pivot10results.com. That's pivot10results.com.